My son told me he was a serial killer, and I believe him. People look at me funny when I tell them my son is 18. I'm 33. When James and I go out, strangers sometimes ask if he's my little brother. 18 years haven't been easy, but I like to think I did everything I could given the circumstances. Back when I was in high school, my girlfriend got pregnant. Her parents were going to give the baby up for adoption, but my mother stepped in and helped me get custody. My son did well in school, honor roll, and he played point on the basketball team. I managed to save up enough money to buy him a decent car. He's popular at school, the kind of kid everyone knows. That was never me. When I was his age, I already had a 2-year-old, a diploma, and a job at the local Pella plant. We live in a 2-bedroom duplex a couple blocks from his school. He does his homework on his own without much reminding and spends free time with friends or wrecking me in Call of Duty in the living room. At one point I thought maybe he was into boys. I didn't care either way, but it seemed odd a kid his age had never had a girlfriend. I asked him about it. He smiled and said, "No, Dad, I just want to wait a bit before dating, don't want you being a granddad in your 30s. That was the end of the conversation about flowers and bees. With the internet and sex ed at school, I signed the permission slip. I figured he knew the basics. I trusted him. He had a good head on his shoulders and no reason to suspect otherwise. A couple months ago he told me he'd be out late. When I asked why, he said he had a date. I didn't pry. I shoved $100 into his hand and told him to be home for breakfast. He was a good kid. I trusted him. Then it started happening more often. On Fridays he'd say he'd be late that night. Saturday mornings, he'd be on the couch playing Xbox like nothing had changed. I never met his girlfriends. I thought maybe he didn't want to introduce me. Like I said, I trusted him. I'm not much of a news guy, usually scrolling social feeds is enough, but one afternoon I watched the news. A woman anchor looked solemn and said several women in our county were missing. The police were searching for clues to see if the disappearances were connected. The idea that something like that could happen so close to home shook me. The idea that my son might be out at night terrified me even more. I talked to him about it. He told me not to worry. James was a big kid, almost 6'5" with a broad build, and I thought his size would keep him safe. But I also know size doesn't matter if someone has a gun. James assured me there was nothing to worry about. Still, I clipped an app to his phone while he slept, a tracker so I could check his location anytime from my phone. Maybe I'm paranoid, but I remember being 17 and feeling invincible. I set the app up in stealth mode and put his phone back on the charger in the kitchen. If I got worried while he was out, I could open the app and check where he was. If everything looked reasonable, I'd go back to Netflix. The missing women story grew into a local media sensation. 10 weeks, then 6 women gone, different ages, different appearances. No bodies yet, but police suspected foul play. When a 7th woman disappeared, my heart dropped. I recognized the name, Rochelle. I hadn't seen her in 10 years. She'd come back into my life when James was about 7. I'd tried to play the mother role and failed. After months of missed visits and failed attempts, I filed for a drug test. She failed. My lawyer filed to terminate her visitation rights. I didn't want him exposed to that. It was a Saturday morning when I reluctantly went downstairs to tell James the news. We rarely talked about his mother. After he was born, she spiraled, drugs took over. By the time she came around again, she looked 20 years older, arms marked with needle tracks, teeth black from rot. I was surprised she'd lived at all. When she first visited, she took James and clients came over while she sat with him. I later learned she'd let men pay to be around her. One visit, some guy James called Steven drove him back. I came home from work and found him sitting outside. He said his mother didn't want him there. He'd sat out on the street for hours. That's when I signed him up for therapy. Over the years, the sessions helped. He stabilized. Then, months ago, he said he'd be out late again. I opened the tracking app on my phone. I didn't realize it had been recording his movements all this time. The log showed he'd been driving out to the middle of nowhere to a patch of woods, a pond, a place off the map, at least 4 times over 6 weeks. On the night Rochelle disappeared, his phone was at her trailer. My stomach turned, but I didn't want to believe it. I threw my phone on the bed, grabbed a bottle of whiskey, drank until I blacked out, and woke up with a hangover. James was downstairs playing Dark Souls. I drank a can of Red Bull, staggered to the car and decided to drive out to that clearing to see where he'd been taking these girls. How I regret it. I regret every inch of that drive. The GPS took me down a gravel road, into thick trees. I pulled onto a clearing with a small pond and saw ashes from a recent fire. The coals were still warm. Relief washed over me. He'd been bringing girls out to impress them under the stars. I was almost proud. Then I saw tracks leading to the pond. It looked like something heavy had been dragged. I walked to the water and felt something solid under the surface with my foot. I pulled at it, a heavy chain, hauled it free and pulled up a bundle wrapped in a blanket. I threw the blanket back and saw a swollen, pale face. It was Rochelle. I panicked. I wrapped the blanket back around her and shoved her under the water. As if that could erase what I'd seen, and ran to the car. I sat outside for 15 minutes and thought I was having a heart attack. Tears ran down my face as I ran through every conspiracy I could think of that might explain why my son was nowhere near this. Someone knocked on my window. It was James. I climbed out of the car, and he hugged me like nothing had happened, saying, "Whatever it is, it's okay, Dad. Tell me what happened." He was so normal in that moment, the kid I knew. We went inside. He sat across from me on the couch and asked what was wrong. I looked at him and blurted, "I found your mother." He made a sound like "oh" and kept watching the TV as though I'd said nothing. I told him police found signs of a struggle in her trailer. He didn't react the way I expected. There was none of the shock, none of the anger. Just that flat, blank look I'd seen before when I caught him in something small and wrong. I stared him in the eye and asked, "Tell me you didn't do anything stupid. Tell me you didn't kill her." He turned his gaze away and asked, "What do you mean by stupid?" I raised my voice, "For God's sake, James, did you kill your mother?" He laughed, a short harsh laugh, and said, "Ha ha ha. That bitch was dead long before I cracked her skull and shoved her in the car. Any woman who'd sell her own kid for a fix is already dead a dozen times over." My chest broke. He admitted more than one murder. 15, he said. He described them in detail. I just sat there. What do you say? What can you say? My son told me he's a serial killer and the only thought I could find was how not to ruin his life. Finally, I found my voice. "We need to get you help, son. This is sick." He cut me off. "No therapist can fix me, Dad. You were a good dad, so I'll spare you the speeches. We both know I turn 18 in a month and I'll be out from under your roof. I've got plans." He sounded calm, almost smiling. For 17 years I'd been his parent, and in my worst nightmares I never imagined he'd be this broken. About a week later I quit my job. By his 18th birthday I'd spent most of our savings trying to drown the image in booze. The next day he was gone. The last hope left me a few weeks later when the police found bodies in the pond. He was already far away. Weeks ago I got a postcard. A sandy beach photo on the front. On the back, "Hi Dad. Just letting you know I'm okay." I dropped it on the table and went back to the bottle. Part of me wants to go to the police and tell everything. Tracking him down wouldn't be that hard. But he is my son. I can't bring myself to hand him over for crimes that could earn him the death penalty. That's beyond me. Each week the guilt gets heavier. All I can do is hope he stopped killing. He was a good kid once, tall, charismatic. He could have done a lot with that if he'd wanted to. For now, I don't know where he is, and part of me doesn't want to know. I hope, selfishly, that whatever he is doing, he's safe.